Life is made up of so many moments, big and small.
Hey, Dad, it's your turn.
Sometimes the best memories are just time well spent together. Only time will tell what our most cherished moments will be. Montana Moments. Celebrate what matters.
Well, welcome to episode number 72, according to Flint. And before we went on the air, discussing how such a coincidence that episode 72 coincides with how old Cody Snyder is. World champion Cody Snyder, I wrote this down, 2023 inductee into the Bull Riding Hall of Fame in Texas, right? You were down there that all took place during PBR World Finals, right?
Yeah, it did. It was on the Saturday. Yeah. Yeah, it was really cool.
That's cool though, to be recognized with well deserved, by the way. 1983 world champion. 1983. I was in high school. You know that in 1983.
I wasn't far out of it. I mean, there's not a lot of age difference. So if you're calling me 72, that's putting you high 60s. So we better, yeah. No, it's a long time ago. It was that was a cool deal. That's kind of that deal was, Donnie Gay called me and he was the guy who said that they were putting me in there, and it was really cool, and he was one of my idols growing up and stuff. And like he said, you're voted in by your peers, so it's really cool. And it, all the other bull riders said that you're worthy, and that was a cool deal.
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked into, and I'll talk about other Hall of Fames if we want later, but I don't know what goes into their criteria, but I know you're the first Canadian to go into the Bull Riding Hall of Fame, correct? Am I right on that?
That's right.
Should there be other Canadians in there? Can you name a couple Canadian bull riders that you look at and go, well, if I'm in there, they should be in there?
Well, I think, now, and I look like John Dodds was my boyhood hero growing up, and he's a guy that guy could really ride. He won the Canadian 5 times, went to the NFR 4 or 5 times, and he was a rock star back in the day. I think, like him and George Paul, like George Paul was John's best man at his wedding. And, when I talked about John Dodds at the induction, the guys who've been around them, everybody remembers him. He was a hell of a bull rider. Daryl Mills, I mean, he didn't last very long. He wasn't around a long time, but he got a lot done in a short time. I mean, I think there's some guys, you go back in them times. Old Leo Brown was the first guy to ride them all at the NFR and stuff, and won the Canadian a bunch. But yeah, I don't know the criteria. I guess, you get nominated and they select you, and they've got a process, and that's how it goes.
As long as we're on it, I said we'd talk later, but we'll dive in here. I've covered this topic with other guys on this podcast. Dan Mortensen went into it quite a ways, and I remember that because he talked about a Canadian. In the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame, one of the criteria is you have to be a world champion. And it's on the surface, you go, well, yeah, you got to be a world champion and get in the Hall of Fame. I think it's bullshit. I think there are people if they're in the Hall of Fame and that guy's not, it's ridiculous. Do you know who? You could probably maybe guess who Dan Mortensen brought up that said it's criminal he's not in the Hall of Fame as a bronc rider, Canadian.
Oh.
Rod Hay.
Probably Roddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people out there. There's people out there who'll never win a world title and should be in the Hall of Fame, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of them, and guys that rode really good. Maybe they got hurt at the wrong time. There's some things that have happened, and yeah, I don't know. I guess they got to set a criteria somewhere. I think with that, Flint, they have that builder category, and that there's some other things there, other ways. But yeah, I mean, geez, Roddy rode as good as anybody for a long, long time, and just never got over that hump. But maybe he'll go in there with his kids one day, and both of them will be world champs, and then all 3 of them, something will happen because they both ride unbelievable.
They do. And it's funny when you see like Rod Hay, you look at him today and he still looks 38, and his kids are the same way. They look 12, just like Roddy.
Yeah.
But like Mortensen said, for one, Roddy Hay made it 20 times to the NFR. And he said, if nothing else, put him in for the influence he had on all the young guys and all the people he helped, including Dan, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and Roddy, today, I mean, I don't know, I'm not the bronc rider guy, but a lot of the amount of bronc riders and them young kids that's coming up through the deal from up here is just unbelievable. And Roddy's had a huge part to do in that. And the way that them kids are starting them horses out, and the way they're spurring them, and he's getting everything, their saddles set up right, and it's really something. And we've got, I mean, they're coming in swarms. I'm here, and there's 10 or 15 more young kids that ride like that right now. Like it's really good.
I think it's cool because being from where I grew up, close to the border, and all the times I went to Calgary, I did the CFR quite a few times and kind of messed around up in Canada. I kind of feel I'm a fan of the Canadians that make it to the NFR, and I love that there's 5-6 Canadian bronc riders will be at the NFR. I think you could just take Canadians and everybody named Wright and have a full NFR. But I'm a fan of those Canadians.
You could have it almost could be blue shirts against the red shirts. Stick a red shirt on all of these guys, and they're blue, and you'd have like a big old deal there. Yeah, it's really something.
Talked about like people who should be, if there's Canadians, should be in the Bull Rider Hall of Fame, whatever. But when I look back, even looking after you, I was in that when I started going to the NFR, it was Austin Beasley, Kelly Armstrong. Would Wade Joyle, I think he was number 1 going into the NFR one year. Am I right on that? Maybe.
Yeah, I think you could be right. I can't remember that, but that's another guy that rode really good, and he won a couple of them back in the day. I think they were called the Bud Light Cups back when he was going there. But yeah, that's another guy. And he won the Canadian a couple of times. That guy could really ride too.
Yeah. You were, you kind of headed out. I've always looked at the Canadian rodeo world as almost a circuit of all of pro rodeo. I thought it should be its own circuit, which it could be. I think they did that for a time, but it's a smaller.
Yeah, I think they're doing that now. It is now.
Is that what it is now?
Yeah, there's a deal they've got somehow, and them guys can qualify for that big NFR deal. I think they changed the name of it or whatever. It used to be the circuit thing, and now it's in Colorado Springs. And I think Jared Parsonage and Jordan Hansen both qualified for it. So yeah, there's some stuff going on there.
But the Canadian rodeo world's just it's a smaller community than say PRCA in the US. That it's more regional, Alberta, Saskatchewan there, when you decided I'm good enough to go south of the border, that had to be, you were like 19 years old. That would be a little intimidating, didn't it? I mean, was it a lot for you, or were you just hard headed and didn't care?
Didn't care. Never thought about it. I mean, I just wanted a rodeo, man. I tell the story, when I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I just couldn't wait to get to Texas, and I won that Canadian bull riding title over here in the CCA when I was 16. And this buddy of mine, Bruce Dirk, who rode bulls pretty good up here, was going down to Texas to look at some bulls. He was wanting to start a bull breeding program, and he says, "You want to come along?" And I'm like, I couldn't get in the truck fast enough. I was kind of like your blue heeler dog. Just open the door and I'm in there and I'm going. And and I actually went down there to Fort Worth and Burness Johnson. I needed one more signature to get my card when I was 16 because in Canada there was no age criteria. So you need to be 18 to get it in the US. But if I got my Canadian card, they couldn't stop me from having my pro card in the PRCA. So I had Burness Johnson actually sign for my card, him and Dale Rose and Rocky Rockabar. So it was pretty cool. But no, and you know what? I never ever thought about that stuff. It just rodeo was rodeo to me, and I couldn't wait to get there. And we've talked about, I've talked to some guys about that, and just to, there's a lot of guys that lack that attitude. I mean, when we showed up, I mean, I had a few, when I was my first couple, 2-3 years there, it was kind of tough. I was young. I was 16. I went to 104 rodeos when I was 16 years old. I went all over the US. And, in them days, there was no cash machines, and you couldn't write checks because you're a rookie. And I don't even know how the hell I did it. Actually, it was crazy. But, and then when I was, 18 or 19, I ended up 17th or 18th in the world that year. And, and I went to Oklahoma City, and they had that big Heston ride off between the 16th to 21st or 20th place guys in the world. So it was pretty cool. But and I always just when I was hard headed, like you said, and it when you showed up, I didn't think I could win. I knew I could win.
Yeah.
I mean, you go there and you're not even thinking about winning. You're just riding bulls, and that's what you did for a living, and you get to travel and do all this stuff you grew up dreaming of doing, and it was just like a dream come true. I just couldn't wait to get there.
I think the guys with that, I'm a believer. I have a philosophy that there are as many great bull riders now. We just have them spread out all over the PRCA, PBR. There's bull riding events everywhere. However, I think that the attitude of, no, I'm just going. I know I'm going to win everywhere I go. When you spot one of those kids, you know them when you see them. There's good bull riders, but those guys stand out. Before we went on, I said something about Chris Shivers. He was one of those guys. McBride was one of those guys. You can tell right away, can't you?
You say about Shivers. I remember I was judging PBR finals that year when he made it, and there's this little kid over there, and he's got his shirt off, and he's got little shoulders about this wide, and he's just this little, and I'm like, ooh, and Tough was over there, and he said, Chris Shivers, and I'm like, holy moly, just and every time he nods his head, his foot's over his head and just spur and everything. And you just knew. And and not only I've seen, over the years you can go through, and if a guy really writes it down and spends some time, but you've seen guys come along and they just weren't, guys who could really ride and they weren't resilient and couldn't take it. They get hurt and go home and never show back up and all that stuff. But when you get guys like Shivers, like McBride, like Mooney, like look at Mooney, like that. I mean, still just tough when they show up. Mooney showed up at our bull riding here in Calgary. He was 18 years old. He came with Brian Canner.
Uh-huh.
And that was the first time I seen Mooney. And Canner was kind of the dog, right? He was the guy, and he brings this other sidekick along, this Mooney guy. And Canner called me, he was seeing if he could get him in that bull ride, and we had a bunch of money at it. And then so the night before, we're sitting in the Ranchman's there, the title or the host bar or whatever, and Mooney's sitting over there, he's got a cigarette going and he's drinking a beer. And I said to Rhonda, I said, I think that guy thinks he's John Wayne. Like, he's just the coolest dude. And he rides everything. And then, 2 years later, well, the rest is history. I mean, the guy goes on to be one of the best ever. And, but same thing, you could just tell he just had that swagger. He had it. And there's, there's just those guys, and we can sit and you can talk about them till you're blue in the face who've just got it. And what is that? It's those tangibles of knowing you can win, not thinking you can win, knowing you can win when you get there and get on hurt, banged up, you're getting on some bad dropping big yanking thing in 2 feet of mud and the rain's pouring and you got, it just and it doesn't bother you. And there's a difference. It kind of, it's separating the men from the boys.
Yeah. That's a good story, because you're the first one that has kind of told that story of JB and Canner, because when I had JB, we sat across the table here and talked, and I always ask guys, bull riders I have, if I get to it, I say, greatest bull rider you ever saw live, like watch, none of this, you hear things when you're talking to guys been around. And I asked JB, who's the best bull rider you ever saw? And he said, best one I ever saw in a moment or over time? I said, just in a moment. He said, Brian Canner. Brian Canner was great. He just couldn't, his body was so little, Shivers was small, but he was put together different. Yeah. Canner was he was fragile. He was little.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Brian was a small, skinny little, he could really ride. I mean, we've seen all of that, but that's where that other stuff, Mooney got hurt lots of times. I mean, you just never knew it. I mean, he didn't care. It just get on. And there's lots. I mean, we're picking him out of there. I mean, I could go through, there's a pile of guys that you can say, that you just got on, banged up, hurt, still win first. Didn't matter where you were. We rode bulls for a living.
Yeah.
And we did nothing else. I mean, I rode bulls for a living. I never even dreamed of having a job, anything on the side. I mean, mom and dad, we had a little place there out north of Medicine Hat. Hell, I didn't have nothing to go back to. That's why we did it. And I've always said this, and I can count on about 3 fingers all the guys that ever came around bull riding that came from any money, because your parents would never let you do this stupid shit I mean, it's dangerous, they wouldn't let you do it. I remember a guy from, I'll do it quick.
Yeah.
Darren, he's a guy from Colorado, and his dad owned 15 Holiday Inns in Colorado. And we all knew this guy kind of come from quite a bit of dough, and he went to winter rodeos, and he was in the top 15, and I think he was rodeoing with Justin Hill and some of them guys back. And I said, "Where's Darren at?" We're all a pretty tight knit group. Oh, Darren's dad said, "It's time for you to come home and run one of them hotels, and you got enough of that bull riding stuff." And that was the end of it. Last time we seen him, and it just never happened much. But the guys who did really good, and you go to the finals quite a few times, and you won a buckle, and you rode really good. I mean, there's some, you got to have some of the other stuff there to get to there.
Yeah. Well, when you look at, when you won the world, I go back, and so I just out of curiosity looked at the list of bull riders from 1983 and some of the familiar names, but it was different. Like, there weren't standalone bull riding. There wasn't the Southwest professional bull riders and the Canadian, but I mean, you can go anywhere this week and watch a standalone bull riding. The NFR, then, what you said, we didn't think of doing anything else but riding bulls. You kind of had to do that to get to that NFR. That was it, wasn't it? It was right there. This is the one place.
Totally. We had one bull riding. We had George Paul Del Rio, and man, we all, when you got your first invite to that thing, it was like, that was a mini NFR, that deal, and it was the only one. And I think you'd get on there with 2 broken legs and the arm tore off, just because that was your one chance a year to win. You could win $8,000 or $9,000 there. It was a big one. It was the only bull riding. There was the odd one that popped up, but not much. And and back in them days, you had to beat everybody, and there was only 15 guys that got to the NFR, and there was nowhere else to go. There was no bull riding finals. There was nothing else. The Canadian finals was on, and it was pretty good. And then you'd have your circuit finals down there. But man, when you rodeoed for a living, you had to beat everybody. You had to beat the best guys, especially if you weren't a guy that ducked off and went to a bunch of them little rodeos. There were some guys that used to do that, and they won quite a bit of money back over east and stuff. But if you wanted to go head to head at them big rodeos every time and win, you had to beat everybody every time.
Who'd you, that year, the year you won the world, 83, do you remember, did you come in number one? Who'd you battle with there? Give me somebody that was a couple of guys that were there that you went back and forth with.
Lonnie Wyatt was in the lead. He was ahead of me by, I think, $1,500 or $1,100. I can't remember. And John Davis had a hell of a year that year. He'd gone to the finals a bunch of times. Delvecchio. There was a bunch of guys that could ride. That's when Ricky Lindsay kind of showed up, but he'd gone in there a little bit lower down the totem pole. But it was the who's who. I mean, Wasey was young, or younger. There was some tough guys around.
Delvecchio.
There was a lot of tough guys that rode good that never made it.
Yeah. Delvecchio, I saw him, I see him randomly, but we went to New York City, to start the year, PBR this past winter. Delvecchio, man, he still never met a camera he doesn't like. He just give it to me, man.
Yeah.
He was the first.
Oh yeah, give it to me, baby.
Yeah. I remember watching.
No,
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Well, I remember watching him on like the Heston telecast, the one night of the NFR. And we were just amazed. Here's this guy in fringe shirts. He was the first guy to play the crowd. Yeah. And that was unheard of in the cowboy world. It was like, look at this damn New Yorker, cocky, playing the crowd. Now everybody does, but he was it, man. He was the first guy.
He was the first one, man. I mean, I think the first time that happened, I think it was Colorado Springs, and I think some C85 or something to Harry's. He rode him and he smacked him in the head and had some blood run off him. He blew a kiss to the crowd, and they all went ape crazy. And he went, wow. And then he started doing it every time he rode one. And then that dude could ride, and he's tough too. I mean, he could take he comes from New York. He don't come from the easy good part in Manhattan. I mean, that he's a tough guy. He can handle it. I got to know Meatball pretty good over there. We call it Meatball was his nickname, and I got to know him pretty good. We went to Madison Square Garden in 83 that year, 83. And then, and that year as well, they had that ride off for President Reagan, that command performance over there in Landover, Maryland. And that's where I got around Bobby's dad and stuff. And you really found out some really cool, man. They come from he comes from tough growing up, and he was cool. That guy could ride. And it was good because I got around him. I hadn't seen him much, ever since. I mean, when you get done rodeos, lots of guys, see much, but we hung around quite a bit there at the World Finals, him and I and Aaron, and we went out and went for dinner a couple of times. And yeah, and Bob, he's great. He's a really good dude.
He is a good guy. Always out of his way. Good to me. And he was before my time. I don't know him other than him just being around. So I like him.
You say that about that camera bottom. I was watching this deal on Earnhardt Dodge, or one of them, I guess this is back 20 years ago. And I can't remember. It was on something like 60 Minutes or something. And they were talking about this big dealership in Tex Earnhardt and all that stuff. And there was Bob, and there was a dealership he was working at. And he was a big time car salesman. He had on this kind of blue suit, and man, they had that camera going. He walked in front of that thing 3 or 4 times, and I just laughed my ass off because that's just Bob. But he was great for rodeo. I mean, I'm telling you, he was one of them guys. We went to Mahan's deal and stuff, and Mahan started. He was the first, and Bobby did things that he was the first. When you talked about that fringe, and he did things that nobody else did, and people loved him, man. He had charisma and swagger. He was really good for the sport of rodeo.
Yeah, he was. He's a dandy for sure. You're bringing up guys who could go through injury, and I didn't. I was. You were a little. I came around after you were done, so I've known you in this capacity and as a producer and different things. Never really knew your career, and I think it was Cody Lambert I was talking to. That if you get a really good compliment from Cody Lambert, you appreciate. I mean, he's very sincere in what he says. I think it was him told me. He said that Cody Lambert, he had a bad wrist, and if he wouldn't have had that, he said he tried and tried, but he wouldn't have had that, he'd have won more world titles. Is he on track there?
Yeah.
Is that what kind of ended you?
Yeah. You just called me Cody Lambert.
Oh, Cody Snyder. Yeah. You guys all look cool. You all have.
No, you know what? Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I broke my wrist in 1987, and I mean, it cost me from going to the finals. I mean, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 times. I mean, I could still ride really good, but my hand had popped. It was just, and they went undetected. I had it x-rayed a couple of times, and they never seen a little broken bone in there. And it was just goofy and weird. And it was a bad injury because the crazy part, like one day I'd be 90, and the next day I couldn't ride one to be 75. Oh. And I get close to making the finals a couple of years there, and then it just progressively got worse and worse. And yeah, and actually in 1987, I rode better than I ever rode in my life. In 1987, I rode like 34 bulls in a row, bucked off one, rode 17 more in a row. I mean, that was a great year for me. And then I hurt my back on the first one at the CFR, and I got a re-ride and got on this bull, and he kind of jacked me up over my hand really bad, and it broke that bone in there. And kind of the rest is history. I mean, if ifs and buts was fruits and nuts, and I can never go back on that. But it was when I think about it, it was, that was a lot of hard, stressful times because back then, we always say, oh, it's all in your head. That's when you weren't riding it's all in your head. Go get your head out of your ass. And that was kind of how we did it. Right. But whatever, that's just bull riding. It's all part of it. You live with it and being hurt. And that was the crazy thing with it. It was, my wrist was sore all the time, but you're always sore.
Yeah.
But I never felt like I was hurt. And actually I was hurt and didn't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember we sat that day and Lambert talked about it. And that's kind of, I see so many bull riders because I've been in the sports medicine room a lot, just visiting. That's it. Just a bullshit. But, and with the guys we have now, it's always in here. Those bull riders it's always that wrist. I mean, that groins and that spot right there, it's just, you just cringe because that can be a kiss of death. Some of those injuries that those guys have that you just have trouble coming back from.
Yeah, it's that scaphoid bone. And I've had some problems. I broke my right one. I was born with, they said 95% of the population has a blood vessel to both ends of that bone, and there's 5% that don't, and I'm in that 5%. So when you break that bone, there's a blood supply to only one end of it. So there's no blood to the other end of the other bone that's broken off. So it kind of dies, it atrophies and everything. That's what happens to it. I know a lot more about it now, but I've been to a specialist with my other wrist because I had that broken bone in there, and we talked about it. And this guy in Calgary said when you broke that wrist, he said we really didn't know much about that. It was kind of they didn't even know how to handle them. It was they tried to put screws in them and they'd shatter the bone, and they had a lot of problems back then. They know a lot more now. Like there's a plastic surgeon out there in Vancouver, BC that works on them. That's like a rock star with wrists, and that's a guy I'll go see when I need this thing fixed. But yeah, it's a bad injury. It's kind of a snowboard, like Montana. There's lots of guys on them ski hills and that, and snowboarders get it a lot. BMX bicycle riders, it happens to them a lot, landing on their hands. And,
right there. When you were done, what did you start producing events first or do TV first? Or was it all kind of the same time?
I started producing events. I quit there in 93. I mean, I was kind of done. I got on my last bullet at Fort Worth, dislocated my shoulder and my wrist. I had this great plan. I was kind of like Rocky Balboa. I was looking for my next big comeback. I had this wrist and had this brace all made, and I was like, I'm going to come back just the way it was before. And that wasn't a very good plan. That didn't work very good. I mean, I had this 44 of Riley's bucked me off there at Fort Worth and landed on my shoulder, dislocated. They got it right back in, but I was like, man, I'd had enough. I was just sick of being beat up, and I'd been off for a year with this wrist trying to heal that thing. And anyways, so that was, I retired in 93, and that was in February 1st of 93. And Rhonda and we got married in 1990, and she had a marketing background in that, and nobody was doing bull riding set in Canada. So I'm like, I got to beat everybody to it. I'll be the first guy. And we did. And in May 6th and 7th of that year, like four months later after I quit, we put on our first PBR bull ride right there in the corral, and everybody came, man. It was tough bull riding. Ted Noose won it. Lambert won second, he made a hell of a bull ride that day. They rode that hair off everything. It was a bunch of 90s and tough. Everybody came to it. It was kind of one of that, because there wasn't a whole bunch of bull rides on. I had everybody there. It was really cool. And then we started, and we just kept on putting on bull rides there for several years. And the first TV I did was the Calgary Stampede in 1997.
Were you a guy, did that come out of nowhere, or were you a guy that, as a bull rider, because not many do this, did you pay attention to production and marketing when you were a rider, or were you just riding? So it didn't catch you. You just didn't come out of the blue. That's something you always kind of had interest in.
I'll tell you the big deal. Flint had a big influence in that business on me was Del Rio in the Super Bowl. I mean, the George Paul Memorial, in the way that Mac Altires would put on the rodeos, he had that music rocking, and I mean, people, and there was girls with bikinis on. I mean, it was crazy back then. It was first, it was 100, I think it was like 126 degrees or something in the arena there in Del Rio at that thing. It was just smoking hot, and Mac had that music blaring, man, and it was just, everybody was just into it. And I was like, that is really cool shit right there. I love that stuff. So when I had some ideas of what I wanted to do. And then, so when we did that first one, then a guy up here, Jim Camart, had started a pyrotechnics company called Unreal Effects.
You bet.
And Jim had rodeoed and rode bulls. And he came to me, he says, man, you're doing this bull ride. And he says, I've got this pyrotechnics. And I'm like, heck, if we're going to, let's be different than everybody else. So we were the first ever in the business to do pyrotechnics. I mean, nobody else had even knew about this stuff. So we did all this stuff kind of, I don't think we did anything in the fire, but we had these cannons and in the roof, and they blast out of the roof, and there was a great ride made. And it was funny because Ted Noose won that bull riding that day in there. or that night, and this he made a good ride. And he was 90, and he hits and he gets off, throws his arms in the air, and Jim hits the switch on that, and this stuff all blew out of the roof, and Ted's ducking and diving. He didn't know, he thought he was getting shot at. It's hilarious. We've got it on video. It's really funny. But yeah, so we had some really cool components, and like that pyrotechnics. Randy, the first time he seen that, when we were doing the PBR Canadian final, no, when we did that Bud Light Cup up here for them a couple of years
in
that was
Calgary.
the first time that they'd really seen pyro. And then Jim started, and Jim and Peter Jabrad, who you remember,
Yes,
so
I know.
Peter's still doing our stuff for us, does all the PBR Canada's bull ridings up here. That was where, and then Randy seen it, and then they started using those components at their Bud Light Cup events, and kind of the rest is history. Now there's pyro's got to be a big thing in the bull riding business.
Jimmy Camart used to do it at the Canadian Finals rodeo. He did.
Yeah.
That was the one thing going, well, not the one thing, but the one thing I remember going up the CFR and stuff is those openings and the pyro and the effects that he came up with. It was ahead. I think he was ahead of his time a little on that stuff, for sure.
He was.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did some Super Bowls. I mean, he did some pyro. He did the CFL, the Grey Cup up here. He did the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, he did pyro at some big time events, and and it was pretty cool to have that, and to be able to introduce new things like that and be the first to do it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. You used to do a lot of events. You did kind of a whole bunch of events a year. You don't do that anymore. I heard you say, why do a whole bunch when you can do one really good one, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was all about quantity back then, man, because you just couldn't. It was making a little bit off a whole bunch of them, and then quality. Then you get into, you want to do quality instead of quantity. But geez, there was one year there we did 18 bull ridings. I mean, and we did the whole PBR Extreme Bulls Tour event. Rhonda and I and Peter, we flew all over the U.S. doing all those 10 bull rides, whatever, and then plus we had a bunch of our own, and we did all of ours from it was full turnkey. Like, we did sponsorship. Rhonda and I, and all the sponsorship, sold the tickets, did it all, and that's a tough business, and I tell guys in the bull riding business, it's really hard to make 30 grand. But it's really easy to lose 60 or 100 if you're not careful. Like, you can get your ass handed to you in this business.
Yeah.
So anyways, we've gotten down. I've got some other stuff going on, oil and gas, and that I'm involved in, and I just in the traveling, and because you got to travel you can't have 10 bull runs in Calgary. I mean, it's 30 miles down the road here. You kind of get, so you want to stay close to home. And my kids were young in that too. It was tough being on the road a lot.
No, I understand that. But as this airs, as this is releases, you're in the middle of one of your big bull busting event of the year, right around Calgary, though, correct? At a casino. That's going on right now.
Yeah, so that's our marquee event. We've been doing that event for 24 years now. We started that at the Ranchman's there in Calgary, and we went through a little deal there, and they shut down. We moved to the Tsuut'ina Nation here on the west side of Calgary, and it's the best thing that could have happened. So we moved there in 2019, and it's just grown. It's gone crazy, and this event this year, so we've been sold out for 2.5 months. We got 4-person. You can't get a ticket. And we don't sell them to the public. I mean, these are corporate tickets. We have a pre-party. You have the bull ride, and we have this big after party in the event center. We take over that whole thing there. And we're right in the middle of setting up right now that arena. And it's a really cool bull riding. And, we got 20 grand a day. We got 80,000 added prize money. I mean, that's a lot. In bull riding, in the bull riding business. I don't care where you're at. And, so we got a great bull ride, and it's a good one. We're going to keep growing. As of this morning, we had 103 corporations on a wait list that want bleachers for next year, and each bleacher holds 50 people, and we sell them 50 seats at a time. So we've created a pretty nice little deal here.
You can see it. The Cody Snyder, Flint Rasmussen Bull bust. Yeah, I can see it now. I'd guarantee you lose 60 grand. But
it's awesome, man. You know, the cool thing we've really built it and grown it, and we've been doing this a long time though, and we've got things down, and we do. Rhonda and I and the cool thing, Flint, is both of our kids are helping us too. You know, they're both went to university, and they've got other things going on, but they help with this on the side, so it's a good, cool family operation. We've got some neat things happening, and we're just going to keep growing this thing. I mean, we're looking at 5 or 6 days next year.
yeah, you've and before we'll change gears here, but I wanted to give you your due on your events. You've donated a lot of money, your events through the years, including this one, just so everybody knows, a lot of money to some good charities, correct? That's your big push there.
Yeah, Calgary, I've been around here we moved up here from Medicine in 1993, and I know how people roll here, and it's you want to give back this community. If you want to get the corporate people involved, like, this is a very philanthropic city, and people with all the oil and gas and everything that goes on here, they give a lot of money to charity. And I said, when Harris DeBork and I started that thing at the Ranchmans, I said, we need to have a charity component if we want to have very long-term viable event here, if you want to keep people coming back and back every year. And so, last year we raised 342 grand for charity. We're right at 3 million now since we started this thing. So, and this year I think we should be able to get, do $500,000 for charity. And we have some initiatives of what we do there. We do Calcutta, and we do some 50/50s, and we've got some really cool things going on. So, yeah, some good charities, and then trying to help the local market as well.
Yeah, that's great. I never worked here at Ranchman's, but I went and watched a couple times, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. You create a good atmosphere. Anyway, they're good events. But your TV stuff, I was on your show. So you have your things you say. It is what it is. I'll tell you what. That was your thing. I'll tell you what. So they give you a show called I'll Tell You What. And I was on your show one evening in Calgary.
Yeah.
Me and I'll tell you, it was you were hosting me and Andy Burrell, the bullfighter Andy Burrell. And I'll never forget, he was giving me a bad time about not getting the barrel, not fighting bulls. And then he listed off his injuries that he's had. And I remember I looked and I said, I thought you said you were good. Like, I jabbed at him. I remember you looking at me like, ooh, but when I look at you as a TV commentator, what I liked is you told it is what it is. You talked about what you saw in front of you, critical, complimentary. That was kind of your strength, I always thought.
Well, I mean, guys who know me, I mean, it's the way I am. It's the way I was brought up. And to me, I just got to say what I see, and some guys don't like it. But I look at hockey. I mean, I don't never compare bull riding to hockey much, because it's team sport and individual sport. But up here, we've got a lot of hockey broadcasters, Don Cherry and some of them guys that and they tell it the way it is, kind of like Charles Barkley. That's what I like. Charles Barkley will tell you what he's got to say. And some guys don't like it, but he says the way it is. And that's kind of how I am. I mean, if somebody's doing something that's not right, and everybody's scared to say what they got to say, I got a big backbone. I can take the heat if they don't like what I say, and come and tell me the way it is. But the truth hurts sometimes. I have this saying. I've said it a lot on here. I say it a lot on my live broadcasts I do. I've said it for years. Rodeo guys, rodeo cowboys want to be treated like professional athletes. Until they get treated like professional athletes, it's almost taboo in the rodeo world to be critical, to say, this guy, I expect more effort out of this guy. He should try. I'm going to do TV. I'm doing TV this fall for the teams. And I did a little last year too. And of course I probably can't, because I'm not technically a bull rider, but if somebody's going to make $1 million, then they should stand up to a little criticism like that. We should speak out more. That's how I feel in this world. Everybody's got their own opinion on that, and the guys are going to say what they say. And I think McBride does an unbelievable job.
Me too.
In my opinion, I love McBride. He ain't scared to say what he's got to say, and he can back it up. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is I mean, I've always said I can back it up. I did what I did, and I've got a gold buckle, and I'll say what I've got to say, and sometimes with the judging can be off, and any other sport, I mean, they get on the referees' asses all the time, and Charles Barkley will tell you exactly what he's got to say about a referee.
I'll be watching the NFR, and I love Butch Knowles. We both Butch Knowles,
Awesome guy.
He's the best, and it'll be the bronc riding or something, and they'll mark a guy. Butch will go, well, and he'll tiptoe around it. I just want to say it, Butch. Just say it. That was shitty. Just say it. And he doesn't, and it's this unwritten rodeo thing where, like, Butch, they can't fire you. Just say it. Cause at the NFR, he does a little.
Butch, he picks his poison. I mean, but Butch, there's time I've heard him say it. He will.
Yeah.
And especially, when it's blatant, I mean, he'll say what he's got to say. Donnie's pretty good too. Like Donnie got much backup in him. He'll say what he's got to say.
Yeah, but Donnie Gay though, Donnie Gay's and I like it. We're friends, but like, man, tonight we're gonna ride 8 out of 15. Come on, Donnie, they're not gonna ride 8 out of 15 tonight.
He's on the bull rider's side every time. I mean, that's
every time.
But yeah, yeah, that's it. I don't care where you're at right now. That's back in the day was all right, but you're in a big stretch when you're saying they're going to ride very many of them. You're better off to stay away from that one right now.
Don't make
no idea what's going to happen.
Don't make any predictions. The one night at the PBR final, it was second weekend, and Lambert, speaking to him, walked in our locker room. I said, geez, Lambert, how many are we going to ride tonight? And he said 14, and walked away. They rode 14 that day. I was like, he's Yoda. Freaking Lambert is Yoda. Were you guys were you were head to head, you were around each other.
We went to the finals
together. Yeah. Was he always
we rode the NFR together?
Did he always try to be grouchy like that?
I guess. I mean, I wasn't around Cody very much. I mean, I mean, he rode with Tough and Jim and them guys.
Right.
I mean, he just he says what he's got to say, and it is what it is.
Kid. We both lucked out. Now, a lot of people would say we didn't luck out, but we both have daughters. You have 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters. So we didn't have to worry about it. But if you look at a lot of great bull riding champions or PBR founders that have boys, not many of them are bull riders. You ever notice that? And maybe it's maybe it's because just like NFL players, they don't care if their kid plays football because they had their own career. Or do kids, when they grow up, see what their dads go through? Like, well, it's just not as contagious as maybe people think it would be. I don't know.
Yeah, there's not many. I mean, Wimberley's kid I mean, you can pick. There's not many. I think Paula Primber's kid has come along. Might be
right.
Like, that kid is sticky. Mike Lee's got a kid riding real good. And I don't know. I wouldn't want my kid doing it. It's so damn dangerous, When I mean, I had my head stepped on and it's not only the riding, it's the traveling, all that stuff. But it's a tough sport. Bull riding's tough. There's no two ways any other way of looking at it. And yeah, it's a tough one. That's it. To have your kid doing that every day, man, it's a hard way to make a living.
Yeah. I have a really good friend played in the NFL, and his career ended with an injury early in his career, but his kid, he didn't care if he played football. The kid didn't play football. He said, I know, I know what I had. I'm not pushing him, and I think it's similar. Probably they kind of have the inside scoop. Not as glamorous as they think, but your girls are the best. All 3 of your girls, Ron. I mean, so you say they helped you? Are they marketing girls? I can't remember what they went to school for.
Well, our oldest Jordan, she's got a finance degree, and she went to to University of Calgary Haskayne School of Business. So she's got her degree, and you know, she's in private equity now at Scotiabank. She's got a hell of a job. She's moving up through there. She's had 3 or 4 promotions already. She's doing really good. She's 26, and she took over the ticket sales side of things with Show Pass. It's called. It's like the Ticket Master up here, and she figured out more. It's unbelievable. In 2 hours, she had it figured out. It's crazy how they just understand. It's all, all that technical stuff. Ticket sales is hard, and she just got it figured out right away. And so she does our stuff on the side. And then Reese, our youngest, she's got a degree in hospitality management, and so she's got a wedding business going, and she's putting on some other events. But her and her mom, her and Rhonda, they work hand in hand, and they're side by each, man. And we take over that convention, that event center in there at the Gray Eagle, and we have that bull ride, and we got 3,000 people out there, and all 3,000 people fit in that event center. So our bull riding starts really at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Then people start showing up, and you got to take care of them. You got to get them fed and get the booze to them. And then we got that bull riding for 2 hours, and then they're in there till 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's a wicked party. And that Reese, she handles that whole thing set up in there. And we have 18 of these corporately branded cabanas where when you got, if you got a bleacher out there that you bought for 50 people, well, each one of those cabanas holds 50 people. So how it's got now, it's kind of almost, if you were lucky enough to put your name and get your company name on one of them, you can be in there now. And so it's a great, big, crazy, wild ass party. And that whole deal is Reese's. She set that up, and I've learned, I just kind of get in there when the setup's going, and it's kind of, yep. Okay. What do you want me to do next? I just keep my mouth shut. She just, you do this, you do that, this, and it's cool because it's her deal. And so, and whenever we're doing something right to have this thing sold out this far out of it. And, with the growth pattern that we're on, it's pretty cool. But the cool part is when you can have your family involved and have your kids. And, Rhonda, hell, we've been doing bull riding since day one. She does some other stuff. She's an interior designer, and she does some stuff, builds some houses and stuff on the side. But it's cool to, we've been doing this, 30 years this year, since 1993. So we've done a lot of bull rides, had a lot of fun, and done a lot of cool things over the years.
You got a hell of a system there. You got the world champion bull rider. You married someone with a marketing degree. You have a kid with a finance and a hospitality. You got the whole event, like self-contained in your team.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, totally not planned that at all. I mean, you just don't know what they're going to do, how they're going to be able to handle that side of things. And Jordan with that, the finance, I mean, she's just got numbers. She's a whiz. And Reese with her, it's really cool that, to have that marketing and that whole background and knowing how to put on events. And, she's got a couple of NHL hockey players that she does weddings. She's done their weddings, and she's got they got a good eye. But you know what? Heck, Flint, they grew up around it. They, when they were 4 and 5 years old, we had them selling merchandise at them bull ridings. I mean, they'd be at the merch table, and you got 2 little girls standing, and they can sell. They got out there, and they learned young.
Yeah, it's immersion into it. I mean, by assimilation. My oldest daughter's got a marketing degree, and she's working for a Learfield, a media company, putting together. They're getting the college rodeo business now, and she's, she sends me her emails. What do you think of the pros and cons of blah, blah, blah? That's all they've heard. It's like a basketball player's kid you just know. And then my other one's a psychology, graduating psychology. That makes sense too. She needs that for,
It's cool that they, like your kids, they grew up around it. I mean, they've seen it, and they lived it and breathed it their whole life. And you can't, this stuff is something you can't really be taught. You can't buy it either. You can't, you gotta do it, learn it from doing it, and being around it and understanding it. And, that was, putting on bull rides when I started doing this. So Christ, I grew up around this. I've been around it my whole life. I knew the inside and out. I knew what, I knew the money figures of everything. And and you pay attention to that, and I had a pretty good idea of what to do coming into it.
Yeah. You brought up hockey. I wouldn't, well, I got, not to reveal the day that we're recording this, but it was recently, like last night. I'm sitting in a sports type bar with my daughter eating. The NHL draft is on TV. I would never turn on the NHL draft. I like hockey, but I'm not like Canada. I'm watching, and my daughter and I, pretty soon we sit there an hour. And she's like, Dad, this is intriguing. Well, what intrigued her is they all look 12 years old. The number one pick in the NHL draft was 17 years old. Connor something. And Connor Bedard. Yeah. I think Canadians are tough. Like inherently, like there's still old school fights in Canada, just in general, like at the dance or whatever. I think it's hockey. I think ass kicking served a purpose in our society, and the less they become, the more entitled our society. I remember we were at Jesse Burns' wedding, and in the middle of the wedding, you went, yes, because you were watching the damn under 18 something on your phone. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, the U18 hockey. Yeah, and they ended up winning. Yeah, hockey's a big deal up here, but it's the same deal. You grow up and everybody played hockey. I mean, there's a lot of Cowboys that were damn good hockey players.
Oh yeah. They're surprising.
You take them Milan boys, and
that's who I was going to say.
There's a bunch. Yeah, them guys can fly. They can skate right now. Like they're damn good hockey players now, and they're 45 years old.
Yeah, I'm not tough at all. Chase Outlaw told me a story. Little Chase Outlaw, speaking of little bull riders. Yeah. He was in Canada at some rodeo or bull riding, and these guys walked by and chipped on him a little bit. Hey, cowboy. And he's like, hey, you. And he mouths off. He said, I no sooner got the words out of my mouth, and I don't know how they did it, but they had my shirt pulled up over my head and I couldn't do anything. I said, they sweatered you, man. That's hockey shit right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Chase.
Yeah,
He got second.
That's a tough sport. That kid, that Connor Bedard, like he's breaking records. Like he's doing stuff that Gretzky, he's ahead of Gretzky on things.
Yeah.
He is just an absolute rock star. And he's filling buildings. Like he filled the Saddle Dome in here for when he came to town. He's played for the Regina Pats. So that's the WHL is the level below. So they get 6,000-7,000 people to a game, or 4, like half full. He came to town as a 17-year-old kid and packed the building. Like the whole place came there to watch him. I mean, and that happened everywhere that he went across Canada. That kid, he's a rock star. He's big. He's a big deal up here.
Were you any good? How were you? How was your hockey game? Were you any good?
I played pretty good. A couple of hockey sticks once. I could score. But I mean, I didn't want to play. I had bull riding on the mind ever since the day that I played hockey, just because it was something to do in the wintertime, because you're freezing your ass off all the time up here.
Well, good luck with your event this week. Are you doing TV still? Do you do Calgary at all?
No, I couldn't do it. We overlap Calgary now.
Oh, that's right.
Our event is Tuesday to Friday, so we're over top of the first perf of Calgary, and then we got to tear this whole thing out because we take over that parking lot. I got dirt and sand and bleachers and flat decks and big old party. We got tents, and we got to get set up. We got 12,000 people going to come in there in them 4 days from Tuesday to Friday. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I'll tell you what, this fall, when I'm doing TV on the team PBR teams, I'm going to give you a couple is what it is. I'll tell you what's just kind of as a shout out to my friend Cody Snyder, who I learned how to do TV from. So if I ever say it is what it is, or I'll tell you what, you'll know. You'll be sitting in your chair and going like that. So.
Awesome.
Well, it's good to chat with you, man. I appreciate the time. I know you're busy with your event going on, but appreciate it. And I always appreciate you at Calgary. It was always good to sit and visit with you. Good to see you at the World Finals. It's always good to see you.
Seeing you, Flint. Thanks.
You bet, buddy.